This is the one question an atheist cannot answer.
I bet let's do it.
Atheists and agnostics, once they choose that path or their point of view, do you believe that they can't be as moral as Christians?
Oh no, atheists, agnostics can be just as moral as anybody else. The question isn't, do you need God to be moral? You have to believe in God to be moral. No, there's atheists that are very moral. The question is, can you justify morality without God? And that's the problem, right? It's not, can you act morally? Of course, atheists can act morally. The question is, can you justify what is moral without God? And I say, no, it's just your opinion if there's no...
Right, the classic, oh, you can't justify morality without God. How? Why is that the case, right? I don't know, I just believe it's the case, right? There's no fucking argument.
There's no argument. Okay. What this actually seems like to me is not that there isn't an argument, but you just never took the time to actually look deeper into the argument. So allow me to explain it for your enlightenment. What the argument basically is that when we talk about subjective morality and objective morality, what we're not doing is using the normative terms, but instead the philosophical terms. When we talk about subjective morality philosophically, what we're talking about is that morality is mind dependent. When we talk about objective morality philosophically, what we're saying is that morality is mind independent. So with subjective morality, morality is dependent on the mind or on human minds. With objective morality, morality is not dependent on human minds and are external to human minds. So what Frank Turk is actually arguing here is that the reason why we ought not follow subjective morality is because it makes morality dependent on human minds. And the problem with making morality dependent on human minds is that you can get human minds to agree on pretty bad things. And if you're saying that morality depends on human minds, then if we have a human consensus, it means that X thing would then be moral on the subjectivist worldview.
Right, to say you need God to justify morality is just fucking ignorant, right? And then he goes on to say, oh, it's just your opinion, right? This is really just attacking subjective morality for being subjective instead of objective, right? Right, because oh, it's just your opinion. In other words, it's just saying it's subjective, so someone else can have a different moral compass than you. And since there is no objective right and wrong, it's subjective. But you're not actually explaining why that's a problem, right? Okay, someone else can have a different set of moral views than me. Why is that a problem?
This again just shows his lack of understanding when it comes to subjective versus objective morality. No, he's attacking subjective morality because it basically makes what is moral, i.e., what is right and wrong, arbitrary. It's a problem because it means there's no justified true belief when it comes to morality. If it is the case that you are against slavery and I am in favor of it, what makes me wrong and you right? On the subjectivist worldview, I'm only wrong to hold this belief if the majority of society disagreed with me. Otherwise, it's fine for me to hold this view. No, I know some of you cheeky bastards who argue slavery was wrong because it had bad impacts. But that is an is statement, not an ought statement, which is what we are concerned with when discussing morality. As David Hughes said, you cannot get an ought from an is. Slavery's bad impact doesn't justify why I ought not do it. You would have to give some sort of underlying epistemic justification for why that is wrong, and what Frank Turk is arguing is that that underlying justification or that epistemic justification comes from God.
Literally, all it's saying is there is no objective right and wrong in subjective morality, but there is an objective morality, so objective morality is better. That's literally all this argument is.
I mean, unless you want a world where we say that slavery is bad, not because there's something intrinsically wrong with it, but because society mostly disagrees with it, yes.
Right, so say for instance, the one true God did come down and say unaliving kids is objectively good. Then what? Do you just accept that? Do you quit? What's the process there?
Okay, well, this argument doesn't prove anything. It just proves that you don't understand what objective versus subjective morality means. So while there are all sorts of stuff packed in this argument, I'll just accept the argument for what it is. So if a one true God came, if the one true God or a one true God or whatever came down and said, unaliving children is objectively good, is it actually the case that this is objectively good? Well, the simple answer is no. And it's because objective morality, or for something to be objective, it means that it needs to be mind independent. Now, if you have a God coming down and giving a divine command, well, then that is something that's based on the mind of that God, which means it would fall into the subjective category because subjective morality is morality that is mind dependent. So, no, this would actually fall into something that is subjective, even if this being or this person came down and said that this is objectively good. It wouldn't make it objectively good because they're probably using objective in the same sense you're using it in, which is like a more normative sense, rather than the philosophical sense. Because in the philosophical sense, it means that this command would have to be mind independent, but since it's a divine command, it's mind dependent, so it's subjective.
Because this entire argument is based on the presupposition that your moral compass is the objective right and the objective good one. But what if it's a different moral compass, a different set of moral claims and moral views that was the objective right that contradicted yours? How would you feel, right?
Well, that's fair. Simple answer: I'd just be wrong. Similarly, you build your ideas of subjectivism on the presupposition that the majority of society will always agree with you. But what if they don't? On your worldview, you would be wrong. I love this convo since I get to bring up this example. If morality is subjective, i.e., mind dependent, then what if Mustache Man won World War II and convinced the whole world killing minorities was good? Would it actually be good? Ought we do that? On your worldview, the answer is yes, even if you disagreed with it. If morality depends on the mind, and the majority of minds are in favor of this, what objection do you have outside of my fifis and my preferences? If you make an objection outside of these things, what you're basically doing is appealing to some sort of objective, i.e., mind independent moral system.
And 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't just, oh, I was wrong, and just blindly accept a God that says unaliving kids is morally good. Right? This is exactly why this argument is so appealing to them, because they just assume it's their moral compass that's objectively true. And
Again, I could say the same for you.
my opinion, I believe subjective morality is better because you can reason with someone that disagrees with you. With objective morality, you literally just can't. So if the objective moral compass is something you completely disagree with now, you're just forced to just subscribe to a moral compass that seems absolutely wicked to you.
Yes, and that's because you have no way to epistemically justify your objection. It's just your preferences. You can't actually prove that there's anything wrong with the moral compass because you don't have a consistent, unchanging standard of right and wrong. Which means, on your view, slavery is only wrong today because most people disagree with it. Which would mean it was perfectly okay 200 years ago when that wasn't the case. Inversely, if we had a subjective society which practiced slavery, I could easily argue that we ought not do that because there's an objective moral standard which says we ought not to, which is what most abolitionists argue. Your only objection, if you stayed consistent, would have to be, I just don't like it, but you can't find anything intrinsically wrong about it because that is the entailment of the subjectivist worldview.